So I decided to do a playthrough of Cuphead, but this time I can't miss a single parry. If we miss one parryable, that's an instant reset. In some cases, like Goopy, with only 3 parries in the fight, being pretty simple, but definitely got more difficult and even where it may actually be impossible. After Goopy, we have the root pack. First phase not being so much of an issue, but against the onion, well, 2 things. First was how fast the tears drop down, but the bigger problem, yeah, no chance getting them. So second boss, that's it, done, can't do it. Except here we can take advantage of a little Easter egg. By not attacking the onion, we skip it and enter the final phase of the boss straight away. Yes, we had to deal with a spinning radish attacking us, but no parries to worry about. Next, the duo of Ribby and Croaks. No trick for this one, only some quick reaction times needed, which I didn't seem to have at the start. The main difficulty is reacting to when the first purple one appears. If we got that, the next fist is predictable, as it comes every third one after that. So after 1 or 2 goes-ish, we got it. Now to our first flying level, Hildeberg. Did forget the chance for a second there. First few phases had to deal with the mini-plane shooting, although the parry is pretty easy to get. A little trickier when several appeared at once, but made easy by shooting them down as they spawn in, then finishing in moon phase with some sped up shooting stars. Overall though, things came one at a time, so nothing too difficult to manage. Same with Cagney, just grabbing the falling seeds before they hit the ground, which I didn't know these could be parried for way too long, and then a slow moving one fired in the final phase. Okay, that's not fair. Since this is a full game run, we can't ignore the running guns, which for some ended up being the much harder part of this run. But that's for later. Our first experience was with Forest Follies, where we have mushroom boys shooting parry balls at us. Taking a leaf out the Hildebuck, we tried to get rid of them before they could fire, and grabbing the spike balls as well as we went through. Pretty simple run through for this one, although unsurprising as it is the first level. Treetop Trouble, on the other hand, ended up being quite a pain. To start, we have these bouncing bugs, who vary whether we get a parryable one at the start, in the middle, or it chose to just dive down into a hole. Next was these tree stump enemies, and these guys shoot parryballs, but not always, and they also shoot before we're even on the screen with them. So if we don't get up in time and they've already fired, we can miss it, and that's an immediate reset. And sometimes it's just impossible to get where they fired way too early. This is not even mentioning having to avoid the flying guys whilst we're rushing up. With the right luck though, and even then I managed to mess up the last guy a couple of times, managed to get through and passed. That one run and gun took about an hour to get the right run, so a bit concerning for later. Into Isle 2, with our next boss being Buggy, Beppy, who has a ton of parryballs in this fight, from the ducks in the first phase, to Balloon Beppy, where we have to get the nose of the roller coaster each time, and of course, the Balloon Dogs, who we had to watch out for either popping, or spawning out unfortunate, or even sometimes impossible spots. Third stage, there's even more, swapping the balloon animals for horseshoes. Took a few goes, especially of that second phase, but finally reached the last one, which doesn't have any parryballs, because they wouldn't expect you to parry the sped up roller coaster, right? Oh, so that also took quite a few goes to get the timing down on that. Reset number is starting to climb, and we're still just on the easier bosses. In fairness, Jimmy wasn't too bad with only 2 phases of parryballs. First phase was a little manic, dashing towards and between the jewels, and then missed out on the first try clear because of the turban later on, but managed to get second go. With Baroness, the main worry is the pink beans that spawn after beating the first mini-boss, as if they come out at the wrong moment, they're easily missed, and I had particular issues with the Jawbreaker being a human shield for them, or candy shield, or sweet shield, or anyway. Don't think there was anything else to worry about for this fight though.
Say hello to my little friend!
Okay, there's no way we're meant to parry that, right? Well, again, yeah, we did. This was awkward as anything to time right, plus the Quality Street Penny Sweet that floats around makes it annoyingly tricky to consistently get. Thankfully that only starts at the 3rd mini-boss, so we only have to deal with that for a short time, and then into the final phase. Wally was a bit of a mix. At first I was doing fine, did have to avoid some eggshells and do some fine movement between feathers to get to the pink angry birds, and the laser shot in the 3rd phase was pretty easy to get. But then, into the final phase. We have parryable boots that get absolutely yeeted. And even if they don't, they get launched with other rubbish, meaning diving in almost certainly causing a hit. All this whilst also worrying about the birds on the side, who shoot out their own projectiles to either avoid or having to parry. Now we could stay safer on the projectiles by sticking to the right when Wally moves to the left, but then this can happen. So the plan was to get to final phase, full health, so we could stay where we are and tank the hits to get the parries. It had mixed success. After several attempts, well actually that's a lie, after many attempts, pretty much caused solely from last phase and requiring a bit of luck on the parryable shots, managed to finish Wally off. Hardest one so far. Onto the Emerald Dragon. Although that's a bit dramatic, more like the lime green dragon. Grim as always was tricky, although this time for only one thing, his ring eyes shooting things. Anyway, after we parried the first one, we would send the second set at our current position, which normally meant skywards, making it tricky / impossible to get to. Also, the clouds didn't help a bit. We landed on them, cancelling the parry motion, very helpful. After a few goes, did get the hang of directing the first volley down and then getting the second one, and once we did get past phase 1, that was it. Literally no parry balls in the second or final phase, so tricky start, but that was it. The first run and gun of this aisle started nice and calm, a balloon to parry over, a bell to parry up from, and then we get thrown into fast moving cannonballs that break our platforms, and if we miss the ball the first time, that's it, because these cannonballs are flying faster than we can dash, so we get one try to spot, react, and get to. Not only that, but when we get close to the cannons, it shot faster than I could react, so had to hang back for space to get rid of them, and after quite a few goes, with misses, falls, and failing to break the cannons in time, got through that as well. These run and guns are harder than most of the bosses. With that line of thinking, the next run and gun took the last one and amped up the difficulty even more. The trope of this one is to switch gravity by parrying, meaning we had to hit every single one of these. Disorientated was the word for this level, especially when we reached the narrower spots. Was that enough for the level though? No, it had to add additional ducks at the start, which fair enough, wasn't too bad, but then from the middle of the level, floating tracking ones. These were just not fair, tracking us down, appearing at random times, and even behind us, meaning had to backtrack quite a few times to get, or just led to getting us hit. And all that is not even talking about how this is just a genuinely tricky level to get through. Honestly, worst level, including bosses, up to now, another hour plus one to get through. After crawling out of that level a bit battered, we now enter aisle 3. Briny the boatman basically has a parryable gun, shooting up to 4 projectiles, with at least 3 of them being ones for us to parry, with the only real issues being if I end up too high when he fires a shot. Yeah, not getting that. He cams it down on the shooter when introducing his chums, but then at the same time, we also have to deal with them. Was fine though, as got to final phase pretty quick, and you might think, that's it, done. But no. Actually, one last parryable. The Gallic gun the ship fires, we can parry on, so of course that's what we had to do. Did take a go to get the timing down on the bounces, but managed to get on the next go round. Now before facing the tricky Calamaria, we have to face the most difficult run and gun we had throughout this challenge. Let's get into it. First, it's just a hard level. So many projectiles, things on the screen, and of course running into anything leads to damage. Next, so many parry balls. We've got the flying fish who appear randomly at the start, bubble stars who again randomly appear in the middle of the run and have incredibly poor timing to get us whacked. Or good timing, I guess. These things, and because they couldn't miss out on adding some stuff at the end, some parryable shrimp that appear, yep, randomly also, and these appear very quickly and easy to miss. Plus, as a bonus, I couldn't shoot to get rid of the others, as it was too easy to kill the parry ones, which to me has been a reset throughout this run. Oh, and we have to parry this anchor as well. But the combination of the anchor and the shrimp getting flung at us made Cuphead not the best choice for this, so did end up making a quick trip to the DLC so we could switch to play as Miss Chalice, who has a dash parry, which made this final section a bit easier, but still was difficult. This whole level was up there. Eventually did get it, but needed a break after. Hopefully the next boss isn't too bad, although Calamaria was one I'd been concerned about throughout this run, and ended up being for good reason. Throughout phase 1, there's normally 2 attacks happening at once, with the worst combos involving the rising pufferfish. With parry balls in there, it was almost certainly a hit when Maria sent the second move, and gave up entirely when she comboed it with the red fish. Can't get 2 barrels at once, and sometimes we just got really bad luck on the spray. So, what was the intricate, ingenious plan to avoid this? Well, no plan really except to cross fingers. All I could really do with this one was wait for a good run of attacks. The yellowfish, which just tracks, the ghost pirates, and the horse spraying water from below. These were all good attacks for us. Had to wait for the right combination to get through to second phase. Even once we got that luck though, the bullet hell wasn't over, as we're served with various eels firing a spray of projectiles. But this one, I did actually have a plan. Kept a nuke saved up from first phase to clear as many eels as possible, and with that, she only managed to get one parryable off, luckily towards us and not up down off the screen immediately, before we finished her off. Apart from the running guns and one boss later on, Calamaria was the boss that I probably cut the most footage out of because we reset so many times trying to get a viable run in that first phase. Nothing too interesting with Sally's stage play, only a couple of hearts to parry at the start, a meteor which breaks into a parryable star after, and then a couple of roses at the end. Nothing tricky. Phantom Express on the other hand had a lot going on. Starting the fight we have to grab these 2 on the platform, then all throughout phases 1 and 2 we have to deal with floating pumpkins, dropping pink brinks that we can't miss. Some were pretty easy to get to, some a bit trickier, and some we had to just get hit to reach in time, although got better at recovering these after several attempts. We're done with the pumpkins in phase 3, but replaced with ghosts who drop parryable skulls, so every time one appears... Okay, that's a bit of an embarrassing one. As we're saying, every time one appears, we had to be careful of breaking at the wrong time. Luckily there's no hitbox on the bosses, unlike how it is in second phase, so it was a touch easier on that side, although a difficulty that I sort of put on myself was the weapon. With a pea shooter it was so easy to miss the ghosts and get clipped, but I could have changed it easily at any time, so no real excuses. Not really sure why I didn't. The final phase, just the tail to grab, although I did mess up on the first attempt. This is still a pretty hard game even without this dumb challenge. Onto Werner Werman, who hadn't even crossed my mind as being an issue, but then this happened. Yeah, this wasn't going to work. Did not have enough time to get one then the other. The platforms on his charge attack were easy enough to get, but with Cuphead there was no chance with the catapult. With Cuphead at least. Let's try Miss Chalice again, which did give us a chance. I first kept banging my head against the projectile above, and some were just impossible to get, but on certain positions we can get the double. Just wasn't sure if we could manage when the two aren't together. After a couple of attempts, getting used to it, getting better, we got a massive stroke of luck. We started into a new battle. Werner opens up with some cannon fire, then changes into his charge attack, and then even more cannon fire, which had never happened in all the previous attempts, of which there were many. He had never gone 3 rounds of attacks without bringing the catapult out, so what did this mean? Well, it meant we were able to do enough damage to him to go into second phase at the end of that third attack, which doesn't have any parries to it, and in final phase just had some parry balls sent from some ghost mice, which wasn't anything to worry about. So done, like that. Guess I could have stuck with Cuphead for that one. And to complete our loop around the map, we arrive at Honey Bottoms, and I'll let the footage speak for itself. Yeah, any modders out there made a stop time charm or super attack? Might need it. And I'll also need it to be multi-use because there are similar issues in the following robot fight. Stopping time or super speed, either will do. But yeah, our first actually impossible levels with these two. Bit of a shame. Before we're done with this aisle though, we have a final run and gun, and thankfully it wasn't nearly as hard as the last one. Just some tiny dragons, a couple of walls which I forgot I couldn't bounce over, and said walls are spitting some parryable gunk out, and that was it, which I was very happy about after the mess of the last one. That just left the devil himself and King Dice. Now of course King Dice's trope is facing mini bosses before the man himself. On our first go round we faced the cigar with no parryballs, so no issues there. But on the next one faced the rabbit in the hat, which did seem like we could get both projectiles, but kept getting hit before I was able to. So instead of banging my head against the wall, went for the easiest solution, which was choosing a different mini boss. On the second run we faced poker chips at the start, again no parryballs, and instead of the rabbit we then faced the horse races Bucky. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. We did have a move similar to the bee, but with only one parryball this time, so that was fine. And our third and last one being Miss Roulette, who had 4 parries to grab at the start, and then we could finish the fight. Leaving just KD, whose whole thing is bouncing on the parry cards anyway. Pretty easy one in fairness, and that just left his horned partner in crime. Now in first phase, the devil definitely had variety. From tracking mini flames, which I found quite tricky to get the right one without getting either whacked or just missing entirely. Bouncy balls, which depending on where it spawned and ricocheted to, was okay in general. And a set of spinning flames, which isn't really worth mentioning, as the parryable one always spawns in the middle. Second phase was more relaxed. The only ones that appear are the bats, which are very well telegraphed before appearing. But then with third phase, takes a flip back the other way. Lots going on. Helicopter devil birds, falling chips, and these side minions spitting skulls. One little thing to our advantage is that we can get rid of these side guys if we're quick enough. This is still a difficult, if not the hardest fight in the game, so even with that, still had quite a few deaths thrown in before we managed to get a good run and finish this. And that could have been it. But thoughts, since we visited the DLC already, why not see how it goes over there? And before starting this set of bosses, finally bought a different weapon, mainly because Crackshot is my favourite weapon in the game. Started with Glumstone the Giant and selected to play as Chalice to go with the DLC theme, which although it took a couple of goes to get used to the dash parry again, was a good choice, as I ended up relying on that double jump in the first phase to grab the high parry clouds. Second phase was a touch easier, at least with the parries, but it's still pretty tricky, as we can see when a parryable one digs under the beard and where it will jump out. And then for final phase, we have 2 parries to watch out for. One find from the side mobs, which we had to keep an eye on, but more so which platform gets the bone, which could be tricky depending on which platforms have already gone. Only took a few run-throughs though. Also, I said platform, but I actually don't know what these are meant to be. Worms? Dragon heads? Parryable thing that comes out as like a tongue shaking a bell. Who knows. Next was a pretty similar experience with Morty, not that one. There was parryballs in each phase like with Glumstone, but this time pretty spread out, so never had to worry about missing one or facing 2 at once, although phase 2 had some poor timing going on, leading to some hits. Little exception was in the final phase where the buckets can be sent off in any direction, by ignoring the other buckets and tanking the hits if needed to get in the right spot for the parry. Got through that and was also done after just a couple of goes. 4 bosses to go with some of the trickiest yet coming up. Not the Howling Aces though. Going through thought it was going to be a first time finish, but Yeah, Chalice's dash parry wasn't really built for the horizontal, so I did have to switch back to Cuphead to finish this one off. 3 to go, and onto the big problem child of the DLC, Esther Winchester. We seemed at first to go like the past few tricky fights, a couple of hard parries here or there, trying to get without getting hit, especially in third phase with the circling stakes, although more than once thought it was going to be a reset, but managed to just grab it when it came back on screen. But then came the last phase. Yeah, no chance of getting that. She fires off a spray of chilies which normally have at least one parryable, but if that one is at the very top or bottom, I couldn't seem to react in time to be able to reach it. Tried many times waiting for the luck of the draw, hoping she would keep sending them forward, as well as taking from the Calamaria fight, saving a nuke for the start of this phase to speed it up a bit. But even with that, too many times it starts by firing above or below and the run is gone immediately. So what to do? Well, it came down to starting position. Even if we couldn't get there, we could be there waiting for it. After the nuke, by staying in the middle, we can only react in time to parry the ones coming straight at us. But if we position below, we still had the time to get the ones fired off down the middle and could get the ones fired below. Sure, a third of the time it goes up and that's a reset, but definitely bettered our odds. I even switched back to Miss Chalice so we'd have more hit points and could just tank through to get the chilies in time. We still needed a bit of luck to get a good sequence so we could reach them all in time, but this change in start position gave us a lot more goes and did eventually get that series of luck to get all the parryable chilies and finish her off in time before she sent an awkward one out. Penultimate boss. Moonshine was very similar to Howling Aces, because at first with Chalice seemed to be going well. First phase, all we had to worry about was these smoke rings. Second was a bit more YOLO, as had to run to the pink barrels even if we got hit in the meantime. But it was the final phase that had the issue, which has been the trend for these last few bosses. Now this tongue attack, we actually can parry it, which I was a bit surprised about with Chalice. But like Howling Aces, it isn't the easiest, so switched back to Cuphead for this one, which made the previous two phases a tad more tricky to get the parries off, as they're really designed more for Chalice's dash parry. But does solve the issue in third phase, with a tiny bit of trouble with the attack at the top, but again this was about positioning. If we stayed at the top each time, no matter where he strikes, we can get the parry in. And that just left one to go. Final boss of the game, Chef Saltbaker. And although I do put him up there as one of the hardest fights in the game, for this challenge, nothing too tricky. In his first phase arsenal, only the sugar cubes spawn parryballs, which we can even catch up to if I miss them. Second phase gave us plenty of time to react to the projectiles if we focus on just one side of the salt shakers. And then as a sort of fitting end to this challenge, the boss becomes a literal parryable object, which we finish quite rightly with a parry. Bit of a shame with being robot from earlier, but overall been a fun and weirdly tricky challenge in some parts. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.